Sarah Chen had always been different from other girls in her small town of Millfield. While her classmates spent their evenings at the mall or gossiping about boys, she was in her backyard practicing combat moves she had learned from YouTube videos. Her father, a retired Army sergeant, had taught her basic self-defense when she was 12, but Sarah wanted more. She craved the kind of training that would push her beyond normal limits. At 18, Sarah stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall with short black hair and intense brown eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. Her small frame often fooled people into thinking she was weak, but beneath her quiet exterior lay a determination that had been building for years. She had spent countless hours studying military tactics, reading about special operations, and dreaming of a life far removed from the predictable routine of her hometown. The local Navy recruiting office sat on Main Street, its blue and gold sign gleaming in the afternoon sun. Sarah had walked past it dozens of times, always slowing her pace to peer through the windows. Today was different. Today she would finally walk through those doors and change her life forever. Petty Officer Martinez looked up from his paperwork as Sarah entered. He was used to young people wandering in with unrealistic expectations about military life. But something about this girl caught his attention. She didn't fidget or look around nervously like most teenagers. Instead, she stood straight, made direct eye contact, and waited patiently for him to acknowledge her presence. "Can I help you?" Martinez asked, setting down his pen. "I want to join the Navy," Sarah replied simply. "And I want to know about special operations." Martinez had heard this request countless times before, usually from young men who had watched too many action movies. But Sarah's tone was different. There was no bravado, no attempt to impress him with fictional knowledge. She spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had already made up her mind. Over the next hour, Martinez explained the various paths available in the Navy. He talked about different ratings, deployment schedules, and educational benefits. Sarah listened intently, asking smart questions that revealed she had done her homework. When he mentioned the possibility of special warfare programs, her eyes lit up with genuine interest. "The training is extremely difficult," Martinez warned her. "Most people don't make it through. And for women, the opportunities are still limited, though things are changing." Sarah nodded, understanding the challenges ahead. She had researched the statistics and knew that failure rates were high, even for the most prepared candidates. But she also knew that someone had to be in that small percentage who succeeded, and she was determined to be one of them. 3 months later, Sarah found herself at Naval Station Great Lakes for basic training. The Illinois facility was her first taste of military life, and she threw herself into every challenge with fierce determination. While other recruits complained about the early morning runs, the endless push-ups, and the constant pressure from drill instructors, Sarah seemed to thrive under the stress. Her bunkmate, Jessica, was a girl from California who had joined the Navy to escape a troubled family situation. Jessica was naturally athletic, but lacked Sarah's mental toughness. During their 3rd week of training, as they lay in their bunks after another grueling day, Jessica whispered in the darkness, "How do you do it? How do you never let them see you break?" Sarah stared at the ceiling, thinking about her answer. "I imagine that everything I do here is preparing me for something bigger. Every time they make us do something that seems impossible, I tell myself it's just practice for the real test." The real test came sooner than expected. During their 6th week of basic training, a group of instructors from various special programs arrived to observe the recruits during combat training exercises. Sarah had heard rumors about these visits, how they were looking for candidates who showed exceptional potential under pressure. The exercise was designed to simulate a hostage rescue scenario. Recruits were divided into teams and given limited ammunition and equipment. They had to navigate through a series of obstacles while under simulated enemy fire, locate mock hostages, and extract them safely. Most teams approached the challenge with standard tactics they had learned in training. Sarah's team was struggling. Their designated leader, a cocky recruit named Thompson, had made several poor decisions that left them pinned down behind inadequate cover. As simulated bullets whizzed overhead, Sarah analyzed the situation with the calm focus that had become her trademark. She noticed a drainage pipe that ran along the side of the training facility. It was narrow and would require crawling for about 50 meters, but it would allow someone to get behind the enemy position undetected. Without waiting for permission from Thompson, Sarah slipped away from her team and disappeared into the pipe. The instructors watched with interest as Sarah emerged behind the mock enemy position. Instead of immediately attacking, she studied the setup for several precious seconds. She counted the number of opposing forces, noted their positions, and identified their communication equipment. Then, with swift efficiency, she disabled their communications and created enough distraction for her team to advance. The exercise ended with Sarah's team successfully completing their mission in record time. As the recruits gathered for debriefing, one of the visiting instructors approached her. He was a tall man with weathered features and the kind of quiet intensity that marked him as someone who had seen real combat. "What's your name, recruit?" he asked. "Chen, sir. Sarah Chen." He nodded slowly, studying her with experienced eyes. "You've got good instincts, Chen. Have you given any thought to what you want to do after basic training?" Sarah felt her heart racing but kept her voice steady. "I want to push myself as far as I can go, sir. I want to serve where I can make the biggest difference." The instructor, who later introduced himself as Lieutenant Commander Walsh, handed her a business card. "There are opportunities for people who think like you do. People who can stay calm under pressure and see solutions that others miss. If you're serious about pushing yourself, give me a call when you graduate." The remaining weeks of basic training passed in a blur. Sarah continued to excel in every area, but now she had a specific goal driving her forward. She researched Lieutenant Commander Walsh and learned that he was involved with recruitment for various special operations programs. The business card became her most treasured possession, a tangible reminder that her dreams might actually be within reach. On graduation day, Sarah stood with her fellow recruits as they received their assignments. Most were heading to technical schools or their first duty stations. Sarah's orders were different. She was assigned to a preparatory program at Naval Station Norfolk, a stepping stone that would prepare her for more advanced training. As she packed her belongings that evening, Jessica sat on her bunk, watching with a mixture of admiration and sadness. "I'm going to miss having you around," Jessica said. "You always made me feel like I could do anything." Sarah paused in her packing and looked at her friend. "You can do anything, Jess. The only difference between people who succeed and people who don't is that successful people don't give themselves permission to quit." The flight to Norfolk gave Sarah time to think about how much her life had changed in just a few months. She was no longer the small-town girl who dreamed of adventure while watching military documentaries. She was becoming someone new, someone stronger and more focused than she had ever imagined possible. Norfolk Naval Station sprawled along the Virginia coast like a small city dedicated to military operations. The sight of aircraft carriers and destroyers filled Sarah with excitement and determination. This was where she would take the next step toward her goal of joining the elite ranks of special operations. The preparatory program was unlike anything Sarah had experienced during basic training. The physical demands were more intense, but the mental challenges were even greater. Candidates were tested on everything from advanced mathematics to psychological resilience. Many of the other participants were men who had already served for several years and had proven themselves in various roles. Sarah quickly realized that she would need to work twice as hard as everyone else to prove that she belonged. She arrived early for every training session, stayed late to practice skills that didn't come naturally to her, and spent her free time studying tactical manuals and military history. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, one of the primary instructors, began giving her additional challenges designed to test her limits. While other candidates got standard obstacle courses, Sarah was given modified versions that required creative problem-solving under extreme physical stress. One particularly challenging exercise involved navigating a maze while carrying a heavy pack and solving mathematical problems at various checkpoints. The twist was that candidates had to complete the maze while wearing a hood that severely limited their vision. Most participants stumbled through the course, relying on trial and error to find their way. Sarah approached the challenge differently. Before putting on the hood, she spent several minutes studying the maze layout and memorizing key landmarks. She counted her steps carefully and used her other senses to navigate when her vision was compromised. When she reached each checkpoint, she had already calculated the answers to the mathematical problems in her head while walking. She completed the exercise in half the expected time, and her accuracy on the mathematical problems was perfect. As she removed the hood at the finish line, she found Chief Rodriguez waiting with an expression that might have been approval. "How did you do that, Chen?" he asked. "I prepared, Chief. I used the time before the exercise to gather as much information as possible, then I trusted my preparation when things got difficult." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we're looking for. The ability to prepare for chaos and then execute under pressure." As the weeks passed, Sarah found herself being pulled aside for special briefings and additional training sessions. She was learning skills that went far beyond basic military operations, skills that hinted at the kind of work she might be asked to do in the future. Navigation techniques, surveillance methods, and advanced communications protocols became part of her daily routine. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in March. Sarah had just finished a particularly brutal day of underwater training when Chief Rodriguez summoned her to his office. She found him waiting with a serious expression and a secure telephone in his hand. "There's someone who wants to speak with you," he said simply, handing her the phone. The voice on the other end was familiar. Lieutenant Commander Walsh, the instructor who had given her his business card months earlier, spoke with the same quiet intensity she remembered. "Chen, I've been following your progress through the preparatory program. Your instructors have been very impressed with your performance. I have an opportunity for you, but it's going to require you to make some difficult decisions about your future." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "What kind of opportunity, sir?" "The kind that we can't discuss over the phone. Can you be at Building 147 tomorrow at 800 hours? Come alone and don't mention this conversation to anyone." The next morning, Sarah found herself standing outside a nondescript building that looked like countless other administrative structures on the base. The only thing that set it apart was the unusual number of security cameras and the fact that she had to show her identification to 3 different guards before being allowed inside. Lieutenant Commander Walsh met her in a small conference room furnished with only a table, 2 chairs, and a water cooler. He was accompanied by a woman in civilian clothes who introduced herself only as Ms. Thompson. Her handshake was firm, and her eyes missed nothing as she studied Sarah's face. "What I'm about to tell you is classified," Walsh began. "Your participation in this conversation requires a security clearance that was granted based on your background investigation and performance evaluations. Do you understand?" Sarah nodded, her mouth suddenly dry despite the serious tone. "There are operations that the Navy conducts that require a very specific type of person," Ms. Thompson continued. "Someone who can blend into civilian populations, gather intelligence, and complete missions that traditional military units cannot accomplish. The work is dangerous, often solitary, and requires absolute discretion." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This was clearly the opportunity she had been working toward, but the implications were sobering. Walsh leaned forward. "We're offering you a chance to attend a training program that doesn't officially exist. If you succeed, you'll become part of a unit that operates in the shadows, handling threats that the public never hears about. If you fail or decide this isn't for you, You'll return to conventional Navy service with no penalties or negative marks on your record. What exactly would I be training for? Sarah asked. Ms. Thompson exchanged a glance with Walsh before answering. Intelligence gathering, surveillance, infiltration, and when necessary, direct action. You would be trained to operate alone in hostile environments, to assume false identities, and to complete missions that require thinking several steps ahead of your opponents. The description sent a thrill through Sarah's body. This was exactly the kind of challenge she had been seeking, the chance to push herself beyond normal limits and serve her country in ways that few people ever could. How long would the training take? She asked. 18 months, Walsh replied. The first 6 months will be the most difficult period of your life. Many highly qualified candidates don't make it through the initial phase. The remaining 12 months will be spent developing specialized skills and learning to operate in various environments around the world. Sarah thought about her family back home, who believed she was learning to be a communications technician. She thought about the normal life she could have by staying in conventional Navy service. Then she thought about the restless energy that had driven her to join the military in the first place. I want to do this, she said without hesitation. Ms. Thompson smiled for the first time since Sarah had met her. We hoped you would say that. But before you make your final decision, you need to understand what you're giving up. For the duration of your training and your service with this unit, you will have very limited contact with your family and friends. Your existence will be compartmentalized to protect both you and the operations you'll be involved in. You'll also need to maintain a cover story, Walsh added. As far as anyone outside this room knows, you're attending an advanced technical school and then serving on a submarine that spends long periods at sea. The isolation will be real, even if the explanation is fiction. Sarah absorbed this information carefully. The sacrifice was significant, but the opportunity was exactly what she had been preparing for her entire life. When would I start? She asked. Monday, Ms. Thompson replied. If you agree, you'll be transferred to a facility that will remain nameless for now. Your personal belongings will be stored, and you'll begin a program that will transform you into someone capable of operating in situations where failure means death. The weekend passed slowly as Sarah prepared for her departure. She called her parents and told them she was being transferred to submarine duty, which would mean sporadic communication for the next 2 years. Her mother cried, and her father expressed pride in her dedication to service. Sarah felt guilty about the deception, but knew it was necessary. On Monday morning, she found herself on a military transport aircraft with 5 other candidates. None of them spoke during the flight, each lost in their own thoughts about what lay ahead. Sarah studied her fellow trainees and wondered how many would still be there at the end of the 18 months. The aircraft landed at what appeared to be a private airfield somewhere in the mountains of Colorado. Snow-capped peaks stretched to the horizon, and the air was thin and cold. They were met by instructors who looked like they had stepped out of an action movie, men and women with lean builds and alert eyes who moved with the fluid confidence of people who had seen real combat. The facility itself was unlike any military installation Sarah had ever seen. Instead of barracks and mess halls, there were comfortable dormitories, a library stocked with books on everything from foreign languages to psychology, and training areas that looked more like movie sets than military ranges. One building contained mock-ups of various civilian environments, hotel rooms, office buildings, airport terminals, and urban streets. Their first instructor introduced himself as David, offering no last name or rank. He was probably in his 40s with graying hair and scars on his hands that spoke of a violent past. For the next 6 months, we're going to break down everything you think you know about yourself and build you back up into someone new, he told the group of 6 candidates. Some of you won't survive this process psychologically. Others will decide that this life isn't for you. That's fine. Better to discover your limits here than in the field where lives depend on your performance. The training began immediately with exercises designed to test their mental resilience. They were subjected to interrogation scenarios, sensory deprivation, and psychological pressure that pushed them to their breaking points. Sarah discovered muscles in her mind that she never knew existed, learning to compartmentalize pain and fear while maintaining her ability to think clearly. One of her fellow candidates, a former Marine named Jackson, broke during the third week. He had been strong and confident during the physical challenges, but the psychological pressure of never knowing what was real and what was a test finally overwhelmed him. Sarah watched as he was quietly removed from the program, and she wondered if she had what it took to survive the remaining months. The physical training was unlike anything she had experienced in conventional military service. Instead of building strength and endurance for their own sake, every exercise was designed to develop specific skills needed for covert operations. She learned to move silently through various environments, to climb buildings using techniques that left no traces, and to handle weapons with a precision that made her shooting during basic training seem clumsy by comparison. But the most challenging aspect of the training was learning to become someone else. Sarah spent hours studying foreign accents, memorizing false personal histories, and practicing mannerisms that would make her invisible in different social settings. She learned to speak with a slight southern drawl that made her sound like she was from Georgia, and she developed a shy, bookish personality that was completely different from her natural, confident demeanor. The key to successful cover identities is not to act like someone else, explained their instructor, Maria, a woman who seemed capable of becoming a completely different person at will. You need to actually become that person, to think their thoughts and feel their emotions. If you're just pretending, people will sense the deception. By the end of the first 6 months, only 4 of the original 6 candidates remained. Sarah had survived the psychological torture, mastered the physical skills, and learned to slip in and out of false identities like changing clothes. But the real test was still ahead. The advanced training took place in locations around the world. Sarah spent 2 months in a European city whose name she was never told, practicing surveillance techniques while blending into the local population. She learned to follow targets without being detected, to gather intelligence from casual conversations, and to recognize when she was being watched by hostile forces. In Southeast Asia, she mastered the art of disappearing into crowds and changing her appearance quickly using simple techniques that required no special equipment. She could alter her apparent age, social class, and ethnicity enough to confuse facial recognition systems and human observers alike. The most intensive phase took place in a Middle Eastern desert facility where she learned combat techniques designed for situations where stealth had failed, and violence was the only option. These were not the clean, sport-like martial arts she had practiced as a teenager. This was brutal, efficient fighting designed to end conflicts quickly and permanently. Her instructor for this phase was a compact woman named Elena, who had served with special operations units in multiple countries. Elena taught Sarah that real combat was about using every advantage available, from psychological manipulation to exploiting an opponent's expectations about what a small woman could accomplish. Your size is an advantage, not a liability, Elena explained as they practiced in the sweltering heat. People will underestimate you, and that moment of underestimation might be the only opportunity you need. As the 18 months drew to a close, Sarah reflected on how completely she had been transformed. The girl from Millfield who had dreamed of military adventure no longer existed. In her place was someone harder, more focused, and capable of things that most people couldn't imagine. The final evaluation took place back at the Colorado facility. Sarah was given a mission that required her to infiltrate a mock terrorist cell, gather intelligence about their plans, and neutralize their leadership without being detected. She had 2 weeks to complete the task using only the skills and equipment that would be available to her in a real-world scenario. Sarah approached the challenge methodically, studying the target organization and developing a cover identity that would allow her to gain their trust. She spent days observing their routines, identifying weaknesses in their security, and planning multiple approaches for each phase of the mission. The infiltration itself required her to become Rebecca, a young woman with radical political views who was seeking to join the organization. Sarah inhabited this role completely, expressing beliefs that were foreign to her real personality while gradually working her way into the group's confidence. When the time came for action, Sarah struck with the cold efficiency that had been drilled into her over 18 months of training. The mock terrorist leaders were eliminated using non-lethal techniques, and the intelligence she had gathered was comprehensive enough to shut down the entire fictional network. David was waiting for her when she completed the final evaluation. His expression was unreadable as he reviewed her performance report. "Congratulations," he said finally. "You've successfully completed one of the most demanding training programs in the world. As of tomorrow, you'll be assigned to an operational unit where you'll put these skills to use protecting American interests around the globe." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. She had achieved her goal of joining the elite ranks of special operations, but she also understood that her real challenges were just beginning. Sarah's first operational assignment took her to a bustling port city in Southeast Asia, where intelligence indicated that a trafficking network was using legitimate shipping companies to move both people and weapons across international borders. Her mission was to infiltrate the organization, identify key players, and gather evidence that could be used to dismantle the entire operation. She arrived as Jennifer Walsh, a logistics coordinator seeking employment with international shipping firms. Her cover story was perfect, supported by fabricated work history and references that would survive even detailed background checks. She had spent weeks studying the shipping industry, learning its terminology and procedures, until she could discuss cargo manifests and port regulations like someone who had worked in the field for years. The city assaulted her senses with its mixture of ancient traditions and modern commerce. Street vendors sold exotic foods alongside electronics smuggled from duty-free ports, while traditional wooden boats shared harbor space with massive container ships. Sarah found lodging in a modest hotel frequented by international business travelers and began the careful process of establishing her presence in the local community. Her target was Pacific Rim Logistics, a medium-sized shipping company that had appeared in intelligence reports related to suspicious cargo movements. The company maintained offices in a modern building overlooking the harbor, and initial surveillance revealed a bustling operation that seemed entirely legitimate on the surface. Sarah spent her first week conducting passive surveillance, learning the routines of key employees and identifying potential points of entry into the organization. She discovered that Pacific Rim's personnel manager, a woman named Linda Chang, often ate lunch at a specific cafe near the office building. More importantly, Sarah learned that the company was actively seeking to hire someone with her supposed qualifications. The job interview required Sarah to balance appearing competent enough to be hired while not seeming too qualified to be believable. She portrayed Jennifer as someone who was skilled, but had made some poor career choices that left her looking for opportunities in less traditional markets. Linda Chang seemed impressed with her experience and offered her a position as a logistics coordinator. Sarah's first few weeks at Pacific Rim involved legitimate work that helped her understand the company's actual operations while looking for signs of illegal activity. She processed shipping manifests, coordinated with customs officials, and learned the complex web of relationships that kept cargo moving efficiently through the port. Her colleagues seemed genuine, and she began to wonder if the intelligence that had brought her here was accurate. The breakthrough came during her fourth week, when she noticed irregularities in certain shipping records. Containers were listed with weights that didn't match their supposed contents, and some manifests showed cargo originating from ports that didn't have adequate facilities for the specified goods. More suspicious was the fact that these irregular shipments were all handled by the same customs inspector, a man named Chen who seemed to have unusual influence over shipping schedules. Sarah began carefully documenting these anomalies while maintaining her cover as an efficient but unremarkable employee. She used her access to shipping databases to trace the suspicious cargo back to its origins and forward to its destinations, slowly building a picture of a sophisticated smuggling operation that used legitimate shipments as cover for illegal activities. The real challenge came when she was invited to join Chen and several Pacific Rim executives for what they described as a special project. The invitation came from Mr. Huang, the company's operations director, who had taken notice of Sarah's work and seemed impressed with her attention to detail. "Jennifer, we have some clients who require very discreet handling of their cargo," Huang explained during a private meeting in his office. "These are valuable shipments that need special security arrangements. The work pays very well, but it requires absolute confidentiality." Sarah expressed interest while carefully probing for more details. Huang was cautious, but gradually revealed that certain clients were willing to pay premium rates for cargo handling that bypassed standard inspection procedures. He described it as a service for legitimate businesses that needed to avoid bureaucratic delays. But Sarah recognized the coded language of criminal activity. Over the following weeks, Sarah found herself being gradually introduced to the smuggling operation. Her role was to coordinate the movement of special containers through the port while ensuring that they avoided detailed customs inspections. The work required her to develop relationships with corrupt officials and learn communication codes that disguise the true nature of the cargo being moved. The most shocking discovery came when Sarah gained access to shipping records that revealed the scope of the operation. Pacific Rim was moving everything from stolen electronics to endangered animals. But most disturbing were containers that showed signs of being used for human trafficking. The weight distributions and temperature controls suggested that some cargo included people being transported against their will. Sarah knew she had enough information to justify taking action, but she also understood that moving too quickly might allow key figures to escape justice. She needed to identify the leadership structure of the operation and gather evidence that would ensure successful prosecutions. The opportunity came when Huang invited her to a meeting with what he described as senior partners who wanted to discuss expanding their special operations. The meeting was scheduled for a warehouse facility away from the main port, and Sarah recognized it as a chance to identify the network's leadership. She arrived at the warehouse to find a gathering that included not only Pacific Rim executives, but also representatives from other shipping companies, customs officials, and men who were clearly not involved in legitimate business. The discussion that followed revealed a trafficking network that spanned multiple countries and handled millions of dollars in illegal cargo each year. Sarah listened carefully as the group discussed plans to expand their operations into new markets. They spoke casually about moving weapons to conflict zones, smuggling endangered animals to wealthy collectors, and facilitating the transport of people who were being sold into various forms of slavery. The casual tone of these conversations made Sarah's stomach turn, but she maintained her Jennifer Walsh persona while mentally cataloging every detail. The meeting was interrupted when one of the participants, a nervous man who seemed new to the group, began asking questions about security procedures. His anxiety was obvious, and Sarah could see other participants becoming suspicious of his motives. The situation deteriorated quickly when someone accused the man of being an undercover law enforcement officer. What followed was a glimpse into the violent reality of the criminal world Sarah had infiltrated. The suspicious man was beaten and interrogated with a brutality that confirmed these people would kill without hesitation to protect their operations. Sarah watched in horror while maintaining her cover, knowing that any reaction might expose her own identity. The man was eventually released with a warning, but the incident left the group paranoid and suspicious. Sarah realized that her time undercover was running out, as increased security measures would make it much harder for her to gather additional intelligence or communicate with her handlers. She made the decision to initiate the end game of her mission. Using communication protocols she had learned during training, Sarah contacted her support team and provided them with detailed intelligence about the trafficking network, including locations, personnel, and evidence of criminal activities. She also identified the optimal timing for law enforcement action that would maximize arrests while minimizing the risk of evidence being destroyed. The raids took place simultaneously across multiple locations in the early hours of a Tuesday morning. Sarah was at her hotel when she received word that Pacific Rim's offices and the warehouse facility had been surrounded by joint task force teams, including local police, international law enforcement, and military personnel. Her extraction from the operation required careful timing to avoid suspicion about her role in the investigation. Sarah appeared at Pacific Rim's offices that morning to find chaos as employees discovered that their workplace was a crime scene. She blended into the crowd of confused workers while secretly coordinating with extraction team members who posed as journalists covering the story. By noon, Jennifer Walsh had disappeared from the city as completely as if she had never existed. Sarah found herself on a military transport aircraft heading back to the United States, carrying with her intelligence that would lead to the dismantling of a trafficking network that had operated across multiple countries for years. The debrief took place at a secure facility where Sarah provided detailed reports about every aspect of the operation. Her handlers were particularly interested in the network's communication methods and financial structures, information that would help them track down additional participants who had not been arrested in the initial raids. "You've done exceptional work," Ms. Thompson told her during the final debrief session. "The intelligence you gathered has already led to follow-up operations in 3 other countries. We estimate that your mission has disrupted trafficking activities worth tens of millions of dollars." Sarah felt satisfaction at the successful completion of her first operational assignment, but she also found herself changed by the experience. She had seen firsthand the human cost of the crimes she was fighting against, and she understood more clearly why her work was necessary. 3 weeks later, Sarah received her next assignment briefing. The mission would take her to Eastern Europe, where intelligence suggested that a different type of criminal organization was operating. This time, she would be investigating arms trafficking that posed a direct threat to American military personnel overseas. As she prepared for the new mission, Sarah reflected on how far she had traveled from her small-town origins. She was now someone who could disappear into any environment, assume any identity, and operate effectively in situations that would paralyze most people with fear. But more importantly, she was someone who stayed beneath the radar while protecting people who would never know her name or understand the sacrifices she made on their behalf. The question from that SEAL officer during her training had been about who stays beneath the radar, and Sarah had advanced because she understood that the most important work often happened in shadows. She was part of a community of people who sacrificed recognition and normal relationships to protect others from threats they would never see coming. Her next mission folder contained details about arms dealers, corrupt officials, and international criminals who thought they were operating beyond the reach of justice. They had no idea that someone like Sarah Chen existed, someone who could walk among them undetected while gathering the intelligence needed to bring them down. As her aircraft lifted off for Eastern Europe, Sarah settled back in her seat and began studying her new identity documents. In a few hours, she would become someone completely different, ready to disappear into another dangerous world where one mistake could mean death. It was exactly the kind of challenge she had been seeking when she first walked into that Navy recruiting office years ago. She was living proof that sometimes the most significant battles are fought by people who remain invisible, who stay beneath the radar while protecting a world that will never know their names. It was a lonely existence, but it was also precisely the life she had chosen, and she wouldn't change a single moment of the journey that had brought her to this point.